Hey, welcome back to the channel. In this segment, we're going to be doing a little electric work and then knocking out some sheetrock as well. So, yeah, hang around and let's get some work done. So here I'm trying to get everything all set up so I can install my electric boxes. I measure up from the unfinished decking, ballpark of 16 3/4 inches to account for the finished floor, and I make my lines where I want the bottom of my electric box to go. These are going to house my outlets throughout the addition. Most modern homes have recessed lighting in the ceiling, and for my project, it's no different. Here, I'm measuring out centers for my hi-hats, which are the cans that you install in between the ceiling joists that will accept your recessed lighting. And then depending on how many recessed lights I want to install, that will determine where I place my centers so that I can get the best light shed possible out of every unit. Running that wire can be a challenge when you're doing it on your own. I don't have the first clue how many times I crawled in and out of that crawl space hatch and scurried around that concrete floor on my back. But I do know that I spent countless hours on my days off running wire after wire after wire after wire. Well, you get the idea. You want to make sure that you get all of your hi-hats wired up while the framing is still open, because obviously once you put up your sheetrock, it's going to be pretty much impossible to get to the wiring box. Also, as a side note, it would really be a good idea to test all of your lighting fixtures at this point of the construction to ensure that everything is wired properly and working as it should. The last thing in the world you want is to have a nice finished room and when you go to turn on the lights, something doesn't work. That right there will force you to rethink all of your life decisions. By this point of the project, it's been about a year since I began the demolition on the old kitchen and started rebuilding the new addition. By now, I've more than doubled the square footage of my house, and once the sheetrock is up on the walls and everything's taped and spackled, the project really starts to take shape and begin to look like a home instead of just a construction site. Now, don't let that camera fool you. Those boards are heavy, especially when you're doing it on your own. And I know, some of you guys out there do this for a living and can toss a full board over your head with one arm, nail that sucker up with the other. And believe me, I take my hat off to you gents. And I won't lie to you, throwing sheetrock around isn't exactly my jam. In fact, I'm not really a fan of doing sheetrock at all. But unfortunately, when you're on a budget, sometimes you just gotta quit whining, man up, and get the job done. So, here, as I mark out my switch box on the sheetrock, the board wants to wrestle with me and slide down ever so slowly. So I've got to hike it back up again so that I can make sure that my lines are squared up to my studs, and then keep marking out that box. And there we go, a nice snug fit. And I tell you what, that good fit on the box is helping to keep everybody in place while I attempt to screw off the rest of that board. Like I said, loads of fun. Now the pros will sink a sheetrock nail in the middle of the board to hold it in place. On large commercial jobs where these guys are getting paid by the board, that only makes sense. It helps the process go by quicker, and for one guy it makes it a lot easier. My small 8-foot boards in comparison are much lighter, and of course, my job is nowhere near the scale that those guys are working on, so I can afford to stick with screws. The screws will stay sunk beneath the plane of the sheetrock for the remainder of its life, and you don't have to worry about nail pops in the middle of the board later on down the road as the house settles. Now I realize that watching me drive screw after screw into this dull gray board probably isn't the most exciting thing in the world to stare at. But if you've never done this before, trust me, it's a lot worse than it looks. For those of you who've done it, well, we share a common pain. But seriously though, for you guys out there that do this for a living, I take my hat off to you. It's definitely not something I would want to do 10 to 16 hours a day, 5, 6, even 7 days a week. Our blue-collar workers get very little recognition in a society that's completely obsessed with incessant, self-indulged, mindless entertainment. We are raising an entire generation of young people who don't even know how to properly swing a hammer or drive a simple screw into a stud. So the next time you take a drive through a new development and see a mason digging a foundation, A crew of framers putting a new house together one timber at a time, or maybe even a set of plumbers and electricians breathing life into a newly framed structure. Stop. Take a moment to be thankful for the men and women who build our society and craft the structures that we call home. In an ever-changing society filled with advanced technologies, artificial intelligence, and global uncertainty, there's a group of unsung warriors that will never fade away. The craftsmen will always be needed to wield their trade.